All right, so hi, I am Rachel Spence from the Cobourg Public Library, and with us today we have our special guest from the Cobourg Horticultural Society, Ron Weisfeld, who is joining us here from his home, and he's going to be talking to us about Container Gardening 101. So a couple of the things that we're going to be going over with Ron are the correct pot size to use, how to correctly prepare soil, and growing and transplanting your container garden, as well as the advantages of using a rain barrel. So that's my introduction, and welcome, Ron.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to mostly concentrate on growing things in pots. Now, as far as the size of pot goes, it depends on what you're growing. So if you're just growing things like herbs, whether it's basil or parsley or oregano, you probably don't need much more than the size of a cup. So really about 4 inches deep is enough. And if you happen to be growing things like that, you don't have to plant the seeds very deep. In some cases, you can actually just put them on top and just sort of pat them down. I usually just put them on loose soil and then sprinkle a little soil on top of it. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you some of the things I could do if we were alive, but there are a lot of stuff that you can actually start early. And one of the earliest and best things to grow, believe it or not, is arugula from seed. Now, I started arugula in the front in containers about the third week of March, and it is all germinated at this point, and I will probably be ready to eat it in about 3 weeks. And one of the things that I did is to create a bit of a greenhouse effect. And in this case, I happen to have leftover plastic bags that originally had kitten litter in it, and I just basically wrapped the container with it and created a greenhouse effect, which helps a lot. Now, as far as pots go, at this time of year, and like I said, I started things in late March, is there are vegetables that you can grow and they can take a little bit of frost. That includes lettuce, radishes, kale, Swiss chard, and onions. And those you can pretty well start anytime, including now. Now, one of the key things with soil is that the soil is the most important thing. As long as the plant's alive, it'll probably do okay. You can buy the best plants in the world, but if the soil isn't good, you're not going to have good results. Now, the mixture I use for the bigger pots, and we're talking pots that are probably a good 2 feet to 2.5 feet deep, is if you've got maple trees around, you can save the maple leaves and put it in the bottom. Then I put peat moss for the bottom third, and then the next third is approximately filled with a triple mix. And depending on what you're growing, you will need 3 inches to a foot of the better soil. Except for tomatoes, almost none of the vegetables' roots go down much more than 6 inches. So you really don't have to spend a lot of money on soil to grow most things. Like, for instance, if you're growing lettuce or arugula or spinach, probably the roots don't go down more than 2 to 3 inches. So to basically fill a big pot with expensive soil, you don't need to. The other trick with pots is if you aren't growing tomatoes, and even then you still could use a container at the bottom of the pot. So you could flip it over. Some people use styrofoam, and that means you're not using as much soil. Now, the reason that you use peat moss in the bottom of big pots, but only for tomatoes, is tomatoes like acidic soil with a pH of about 4.5, with 7 being neutral. Now, using this method, especially if I've got pots that are getting the heat either from the south part of the wall, in this case the garage, or the west wall, which is part of the house, I occasionally will have tomato plants that will be as much as 10 feet tall, and occasionally I will have more than 100 small tomatoes, that's cherry tomatoes, on each of the tomato plants.
Wow.
Now, I've already told you about the cold vegetables, and then there's the second tier of vegetables. And generally speaking, it's not worth planting things like tomatoes until you almost get into June.
Oh, okay.
Tomatoes generally will not die if it gets down to, let's say, 4 or 5 degrees Celsius at night, but on the other hand, they're not too happy. So I've, in the past, have started things in May, put them in the greenhouse and taken care of them. If it looks like frost, I'll put them in the garage, and I'll start them out, let's say, the beginning of May, and by the end of May, they've almost doubled in size. But if I get a hot week in June, they'll double in size in 3 to 4 days. So the extra effort is really not worth it. Tomatoes generally like temperatures above 10 degrees Celsius at night and above 20 degrees Celsius during the day. And as a general rule, you want pretty well that type of weather forecast before you start planting tomatoes in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Other vegetables I find actually even like it warmer than that. So things like cucumbers, the squashes, zucchini, and beans are not worth planting. Again, sometimes beginning of June, and if it's a cool June, you can pretty well plant the middle of June. Where we are in our climate, you can pretty well plant almost anything until almost the end of June, and you'll still be able to get a harvest.
So what would be the top like 4 things that you would suggest planting right now for people in their container gardens?
Well, arugula I find will germinate in 3 to 4 days. Spinach, probably about a week. And the other thing you can plant that does quite good around this time of year is peas. Now, the secret with planting peas is that you're better to soak them for about 24 hours and then plant them, usually about a half an inch deep.
Okay.
Now, most peas will climb, so if you have a structure that it can climb up, that is the best thing to do. Now, you can buy structures, but the problem is these days most places are going to charge you $50 to $100 to buy something that climbs. If you're creative like I do, sometimes I'll just get one of the big cages for tomatoes, and they'll climb up the side and climb on each other. And those tomato cages are usually about $5, $6. In my case, I got them for free from a neighbor. The other thing that I sometimes do for cucumbers to climb is I'll just get pieces of small driftwood and make them into a teepee and have them climb up that way. The other thing which really works good, and I got the idea in Croatia, is you get large pots, you put them about a foot apart, and have 3 of the pots, and then put in thick bamboo poles in the back of the pots, and then cross smaller bamboo poles along the 3 bigger poles, so you create like a lattice, and I will end up with a structure with the pots where the plants will be about 7 feet high and about 9 feet wide, and that'll be a combination of tomatoes, cucumbers, and climbing beans.
That sounds beautiful, actually, just the way that you've described it.
Well, hopefully we can talk to you about later, but if we actually open up later in the summer, maybe I can have some people come over and look at the garden. And talking about looking at the garden, it probably won't take place, but on Sunday, July 12th, the 4 club members from the garden club that I belong to, which is the garden club and the horticultural group in Cobourg, is part of a 4-group club, which includes Port Hope, Grafton, and I think Brighton. And we are doing it this year, and I'm doing one of the gardens, but depending on what we're allowed social contact wise, it may or may not go ahead. I suspect we'll probably have an answer on that by the end of May, because we still have to, plan things. But right now, we only have 5 people maximum together. Now,
Right.
if that wasn't the case, though unfortunately it's just started to spit about a half an hour ago, I could have literally set up 15 to 20 chairs in my driveway and theoretically had a presentation from there. But obviously, not meeting with more than 5 people, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, we're kind of dealing with a new normal right now. So, thank you for being here today. I guess another thing that I'm also wondering about is how long should you keep something like arugula or peas or cucumber or something like that inside when you plant it in a container? And then when should you approximately transport it outside?
Well, in reality, most of those things I just start straight outside. I mean,
Oh, okay.
a
I
lot of
didn't.
people are actually afraid of seeds, but they're actually quite easy. So arugula, I just, like I said, 3 to 4 days it'll germinate. Most of the other stuff, 7 to 10 days. And I'll just put them straight into the soil. I don't bother transplanting them. The stuff that's best to transplant, probably I find, are tomatoes, and some of the squashes like yellow squash, zucchini, acorn squash, and those I'll start. Now, how I usually start those is I'll get a container about this size.
Mhm.
And one of the easiest way to store them is just get an old muffin tray. Oh, and a little glare, but you can see how well that fits in the muffin tray.
Perfect. Yeah.
And with these, there's holes in the bottom. Yeah, actually you can see, I think. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can actually see the hole in the bottom. So you can actually put this straight into the soil. You don't actually have to even, take it out. Now, the other thing is what I do if I'm planting a lot more stuff, which I do, is I just use the containers from the plants that I've gotten the year before, which are about the same size. And I'll start the seeds in those. And I have a mini greenhouse. Actually, I have 2 of them. Now, the greenhouses that I use are basically metal that's snapped together with a top. And then over the top, there's a plastic that comes with it. And the smallest ones usually sell for about $30 to $35, and the next size is about $10 to $15 more than that. And they'll usually sell them at places like Home Depot and I think it's JSK is selling those. And what I'll do is I'll buy a 4-pack of tomatoes. That tomatoes aren't much more than 3 inches high. And once I put them in, let's say this year, probably about the 2nd or 3rd week of May, because it looks like the first 2 weeks are going to be cold, they'll double in size every 3 to 4 days. So by the end of May, I'll have plants that are close to 10 inches to a foot high. That for a 4-pack, I'll spend anywhere from $1.25 to $2. And by the end of the month, I'll have tomatoes in the greenhouse that most places are charging between $1.99 and $4.99.
Do you have anywhere locally that you would recommend people go to purchase seeds, or anywhere that delivers or anything like that? Like, I know that we offer seeds through the library, totally free, but we might not have the selection that some people might want. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions there.
Price-wise, they're pretty all the same. Now, there are the dollar stores, and I think also Giant Tiger, that will sell some seeds, and they're usually 3 for $1 or 4 for $1.25. But those are, I've had reasonable results with them. They're not top quality seeds, but they don't have a huge variety. But they'll have usually yellow beans, green beans, radishes, some lettuces, usually zucchini, and some flowers. And then you can go to pretty well any garden store these days and get whatever seeds you want.
Mhm.
And Mackenzie, which is considered one of the better ones, generally do not go on sale. Now, the store in Peterborough and also the next closest one, I guess out is up similarly distance if you're going east or west, usually has a sale the third week and second week sometimes of April, but obviously that's past now. But usually you're looking at sort of $2 to $3 for a package of seeds. And Home Hardware has their own variety. Again, not a huge selection, probably about 20 different types of seeds, and they're usually about $1 cheaper than anybody else's. My personal view is that most things that are generic are probably just about the same quality. They're just packaged by whoever. And the other thing which I do, which is at the end of the season, some places will clear seeds, but it's hit and miss. So last year, Home Hardware here didn't clear their seeds, but I happened to be in Oshawa where my wife was shopping at a fabric place and they had a Home Hardware store there, and I was killing time, and they were clearing seeds for 4 packages for $1.
Perfect.
And most of the seeds, of course, they can't sell them because they're a year old, but most seeds will be good for at least 2 years and sometimes as many as 4 years.
Okay, that's good to know. If someone was living in a condo, for example, or an apartment building, like I live in an apartment building, would you recommend anything specifically that they could keep like in a windowsill, like if you don't have a balcony even?
Well, normally windowsills, you could probably grow herbs.
Okay.
I don't think there's much in the way of vegetables that would do well in a windowsill, though I've never really tried it. But if you've got a little balcony, generally speaking, you need a minimum of 6 hours of sun. And depending on like things like tomatoes, if you got a tiny Tim tomato, which is this probably needs the least amount of soil, probably 6 inches would be enough to grow that type of tomato. If you got what's called a patio tomato plant, a foot probably would be enough. And obviously the bigger the tomato, probably the bigger pot it is. So if you want a beefsteak tomato, you probably need close to 2 feet of soil. Now, the other thing is that with plants, you can actually put into pots as much and different types of vegetables as you want. Though some vegetables do a lot better and some don't do that well together. So one of the things that I do is I will get a pot, and I did this last year, that probably wasn't much more than 12 inches diameter. So you're talking about a fairly small pot. Mm-hmm. And I had a patio tomato plant in the middle. And then around the outside, only about an inch or away from the bottom of the tomato plant, I put a tiny little carrot seeds around it. And then about 4 inches away near the corner of the pot, I put another round of carrots around. And the carrots and the tomatoes happen to do extremely well. And where I got the idea was from a book called, I don't know if we can get, Carrots Love Tomatoes.
That's great. Aw.
And I'm just reading a few things from here. Now, a lot of people like basil, and basil, it's kind of an interesting because it likes it when it's warm. Again, probably not worth planting until it warms up in June. But basil seeds also are very easy to germinate. Again, you can almost just put them on top of the soil and pat them down, and they'll germinate within a week. And you'll probably have basil within 3 to 4 weeks. Now, basil likes about 6 hours of sun. If you happen to have it in direct sun, especially green basil, will bleach out. And if you've got the darker reddish, purplish ones, they will do better. The other thing, which doesn't apply too much, but I'll give you a few highlights. If people are doing other things in pots and actually putting stuff in the gardens, basil also repels flies and mosquitoes. And beans are actually quite interesting because beans and also peas replace nitrogen in the soil. So you're actually better to mix up beans with various types of vegetables because it actually replaces the nitrogen that they use up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now,
Okay.
part of that is that most crops you have to basically alternate, but tomatoes actually are the exception, and you can pretty well do tomatoes in the same plot each year as long as you don't get any disease. So what I do is I have the beans climb up the middle of the pot. I mean the planter garden. In this case, I've got 3 raised beds, and then I'll have tomatoes all the way around. And of course, the tomatoes are using up the nitrogen, and the beans are putting it back in.
Okay.
One of the other tricks for soil and containers, so you can do it in pots and in the garden as well, is I'll get, in this case, because we're a new subdivision, I actually get people to give me bags of leaves. Maples work best because oak doesn't break down very much. It tends to be more acidic. And I'll chop them up, put them basically on top of the soil, cover the soil with the leaves with about 4 inches of earth. And by this time of year, almost all the leaves have decomposed. So it's like pre-fertilizer. And that also happens to make a perfect environment for worms. And worms happen to be one of the best things in your garden to break down material and provide nutrients. And if you don't want to use the system I've just described, you can spend about $15 on something called worm castings. And I don't have to.
Yeah,
I don't think I have to tell you what that is.
Yeah, okay, so that's great. We're just going to, I guess, wrap it up at this point. Is there any other?
Oh yeah, I got a few more things.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
I've got 3 rain barrels, and the advantage of rain barrels is that rain, of course, doesn't have chlorine. Second, it has more oxygen than having it from the hose. And for things like tomatoes, they're the same as us. They don't like cold showers.
No.
And talking about cold showers, if you're watering things like tomatoes, you water them from the base. You don't pour them on the leaves.
That makes sense. Okay. I am a complete newbie at all of this, so this is very helpful. Thank you.
Now, a few other hints. In this case, I put it into the garden because I can't show you. Some places are selling live lettuce where you basically cut the roots off the lettuce and then you eat the lettuce. And of course, most people throw out the roots. Mm-hmm. Well, all you have to do is put the roots in water and you'll start getting another lettuce growing. And the same principle applies to celery. And this I did about 4 weeks ago. And that's the bottom of a celery plant. I'll hold it up to give you a better idea. And you can see the roots starting.
I did mine too.
Plant in the garden in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was quick. I was shocked. I just put it with a little bit of water in the bottom on the windowsill and
yeah. And it'll do well, that way.
Yeah, so do you, is there any sort of way that if people want to become involved in the Horticultural Society once things start to reopen a little bit, did they just contact someone? Like, how did you end up becoming involved?
Well, in this case, I happen to belong to a tennis club and other groups, and some were members, and I ended up joining the Horticultural Society in Cobourg, which is one of the longest ones running in Canada.
Wow.
I think it's now over 100 years old that it's been continuously running. And they have over 150 members. And normally we have a speaker almost every month except for the summer. And they're very good speakers. And it's quite reasonable. It's, I think, $25 for one and $40 for a couple to join. And unfortunately, this year they usually have a plant sale, which is our main fundraiser, which we do either the long weekend, and this year, because it looked like the long weekend was a little earlier, we were going to do it the weekend after. Well, obviously that is not going to be a factor this year.
Yeah.
There'll actually be some people who will be putting plants out for sale at the bottom of their driveways, but that you can sort of drive around town if you want to help the club. But unfortunately, this year, the earliest that we're going to have any speakers looks like September.
Okay, that's really good to know, though. So thank you
But
very much.
normally, like I said, there's the 4 club tour, which may or may not take place on July 12th. And we also usually do a presentation in the library, and that's usually in August for flowers and vegetables.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, Ron. I really appreciate it. And I know everyone who's watching this is going to have follow-up questions. So they're probably going to post them on social media. And then from there, I will send them your way. And if you have anything to add at that point, we'll post it back on social media. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
And the other thing is, if the library does open, I have a lot of extra seeds left over from last year, including regular beans. But 2 of the beans that I have are interesting. Most people know about Scarlet Runner beans, which have red flowers, but I actually have a turkey craw bean that has white flowers and tends to be better for eating. And both of those beans, if you soak them similar to peas for about 24 hours before planting them, and I will have those climb on a good summer, probably pushing 8 feet high and covering the whole fence.
That'd be great. Just something extra to add to our collection right now. For anyone who doesn't know it out there, we do have a seed library. So that gives the people who have a Cobourg Public Library card the opportunity to access an array of different seeds completely free. And we are currently taking orders for delivery online. You can just head to our website, cobourg.library.on.ca, and we'll leave it at that. Again, thank you.
I guess one other thing I should add, because I had started it, is I think it's Iona's has a plant place on the reservation just past Baltimore. And she tends to have the best stuff and the best prices. And you don't pay sales tax because it's part of the reserve.
Okay, that's good to know.
She does, and she's got a pretty good selection, not as much for fruit and vegetables, but really good flowers and geraniums and things like that. And on the way, on the right-hand side, just past Baltimore, is Baltimore Valley, and they have a pretty good selection of things there. And just up Ontario Street, about 3 kilometers on the right-hand side, is Mark's. And he has a pretty good greenhouse with lots of variety. And then, of course, pretty well, whether it's Home Depot, Home Hardware, or the Independent, they'll have their own garden centers as well. So there's no shortage of garden centers around. And then, of course, you've got the 2 farmers markets, which, again, aren't going to be open until at least probably July, in Cobourg and Port Hope. And they'll sell tomatoes and various other things as well.
That's right. There's some really great local options. So if you're interested, definitely look into it. And you can also comment on this post and let us know if you have any questions at all. So thank you so much.